thrifty, frugal, words that his staff used to describe Harrison. They also knew he was genuinely interested in providing his listening audience with a quality product. Harrison put each available dollar to work to make sure his listeners knew where they could turn for reliable, accurate news and information.
Early on, I wanted to emulate WABC in New York or WMAL in Washington. These were the epitomes of broadcasting, the big leagues of radio. But after a while, I realized that our market was unique. We were filling a particular niche. There were things that we had to do in order to serve our community that may have sounded kind of small town, but very important.
Arch wanted to provide a broad range of programs to reach many, many listeners in the community. In ratings terms, we may not have had a large quarter-hour audience. We didn't have a group of people who listened all the time. But over a week's time, we had a very large cumulative audience.
With the jazz scene, I'm not sure how many people listened to Mac Moore, but he loved it. He wanted to do it. And I said, fine, Mac, let's do it.
We did not narrowcast. Modern radio stations narrowcast. They pick a demographic, and that is their audience, 18 to 25-year-old males. We were broadcasting to our entire community. We were the hub of the community. We were acting very much like the internet works now for Orange and the environs. Information would flow into the radio station. We would disperse it. Our audience was everybody in the community.
There would be people who would listen only for news. They would listen to the newscast in the morning, and that was it. There were people who would only listen to high school football on Friday nights. There were people who would only listen to classical music or a jazz music program in the evening, and that's all they ever heard.
Perfectly tuned into the town. It just, there was a strong commitment to news and public affairs, and people in the town just embraced it. It was, it's radio like you don't hear anymore.
I remember people talking about what they heard on the station a lot. I remember, just downtown, or at choir practice, somebody would say something about what they heard Art say on the radio, or some joke that Bill Little told in the morning. It was tied into the community in a way that is not as common to see nowadays.
Each of us, I think, that worked on the air were personal clearinghouses of information.
And as long as you could interact with the local people a lot, then radio was really a lot of fun for me. Because when I wasn't interacting with the announcers on the air and on the air stuff, I was interacting with the people in the sales. And it was the same thing. They knew me from the radio station, and it was just like old home week when you went. So I never pretended that I was a great salesman. I just happened to believe in what I was selling. And it worked. I can't ever remember anyone canceling their ads because they didn't work or because they didn't get results. Now, whether they could measure the results or not, I don't know. I mean, they seemed to, they stuck with us.
Every day was trying to improve the sound, your personal sound, the sound of the station. Ross Hunter and I call that fine-tuning, always fine-tuning the station, the sound, our own performance. Polishing a rock, it wasn't noticeable, but after the time, it was a smoother sound.
Over the period of time that I worked at WJMA, the programming changed quite a bit. From the time I came to the time I left, it was really a very different station, but it took years to evolve.
There was one thing I always noticed at the county fair. There used to be the same comment every year that we went to the fair. We love the station, we love the people, but who picks out that music you play? And it didn't matter if we did pop, it didn't matter if we did rock, it didn't matter if we did country. And finally it struck me is people are listening to the station that don't like the music we play. So they gotta like something else. And I think it was the news, it was the personal involvement, and that we were what Arch Harrison wanted us to be, the informed friend.
I respectfully disagree. Very much like when people lose their luggage on an airline People only tell you about the music they don't like when you play something they don't like. 95% of the time, people arrive at their destination with their luggage in hand. You never hear about it. 95% of the time, I think people found the music at least tolerable, maybe even enjoyable. It was when you played the Conway Twitty song or the Olivia Newton-John song that somebody didn't like, they'd tell you about it. You only heard from people generally when they were displeased.
You don't have to like the music, because the music is a small part of the element. It's the person who's behind that mic. It's what the station is doing to contribute to the community and what the community's perception of the station is. We succeeded at that, and yes, it's not easy, but nothing that's worth doing, another archism, nothing that's worth doing is easy. It takes a great deal of work, and it takes some struggle, and it just takes effort. But it pays off in the long haul.
At JMA, it seemed like there was more of an effort to create a well-rounded human being behind the microphone than there has been in some stations that I know of. I think it's one reason why JMA was successful, because people felt like they knew those guys. And that, I think that creates a connection. And creating those moments is what radio is all about, those moments of connection.
And it never felt like work. I don't think anybody at the radio station, it's like we were stealing, this isn't work. This is fun, let's take on the UVA basketball team in a game of softball, it was just great fun. And on a hot day, we'd go out in the parking lot and do a live remote and fry an egg on the hood of Bill Little's car.
You remember the time we fried an egg out on my car out in the parking lot? We could do dumb things like that they were dumb, but they were fun, and people would listen and they would laugh about it.
Arch Harrison said we kind of blew it. Of course, it was live. You can't get it right. You always look back in retrospect and say we could have done it like this. But Arch said our reporter that was broadcasting the egg frying episode should have been Al Buman.
You might say Arch put together an ensemble cast. People complimented the weaknesses of others. Where one person was not particularly good in some area, there would be other people who were really good in that. And you could feed off the other people, improve your skills. And the whole combination made a product that was greater than each of its parts.
One of the talents Arch Harrison had was bringing people together and really bringing out the best in people and creating a family situation where I think everybody in the station, from Ross Hunter to Phil Goodwin, who spent hours and hours and hours in the control room, to the people who did the news, to Pat Watson in front, the people who did the sales, Bill Little, everybody wanted to do the best they could, and they didn't want to let anybody else down. And it was a magical working situation.
You often hear about businesses wanting to be a family, but I think it was pretty much a family. People tended to know one another outside of work. I think there's a picture somewhere of the radio station picnic at Graves Mountain Lodge. And it's a huge crowd. There were a lot of people there.
It was a great place to work. It was fun, and the people were professional and so on and so forth, but they also were, it's been fantastic senses of humor.
It was a good place to start in radio, and I'm grateful to Arch for providing a good launch pad. He was a good man. It was a good place to work.
I enjoyed it.
The only local newspaper serving Orange County, the Orange Review, came out weekly. To fill the need for a daily classified advertising medium, in October of 1963, WJMA began airing a program called Swap Shop.
Well, Swap Shop is pretty standard fare in small market broadcasting, but we had it ran forever.
Took phone calls, people buying and selling stuff.
Dan, good morning. You're on Swap Shop.
I have for sale a 1968 Chevrolet van. It has a small V8 307, automatic transmission. It needs some body work, and we'll discuss the price.
All right.
And I'll be here all day. And my telephone number is 6.
The Craigslist of its day, I suppose. Over the years, Swap Shop developed into a half-hour program. And it was no problem at all to fill a half hour with phone calls from listeners. Very popular program. And again, another example of the sort of narrow programming that Arch did. Swap Shop was definitely not for everybody.
I did Swap Shop several times. It was a juggling act, and I don't recall enjoying it very much.
One of my regret, I never got to host Swap Shop, ever. And you know, I just think that's going to be a void in my life for as long as I can remember.
I mean, people today, they don't remember WJMA for the music, and they don't even remember that much for the news, but they sure remember it for Swap Shop. Swap Shop.
Foreshadowing Craigslist, Swap Shop wasn't the only arrow to the future at WJMA. Quiet innovation was part of the station's evolution.
We also were the pioneers in converting America to the metric system. We started giving the temperature in Celsius and then Fahrenheit because we knew that any day the standard would be adopted nationwide and we'd all have to buy a set of metric wrenches. We were way ahead, and in fact, we were driving an Edsel.
A speech major at George Washington University, Harrison had studied phonetics. His knowledge of the International Phonetic Alphabet enabled him to transcribe precisely his preferred pronunciation of words, especially troublesome place names for his staff.
Arch was a stickler on good grammar. He listened to them. He was in his car. He listened. If he heard a grammatical error, they were told about it.
And in Moscow, and Arch came in and said, "There are no cows in Moscow."
Had a last name that was spelled Taliaferro. Why that is pronounced Tolliver escapes me, but by golly, I learned.
It's Arab, not Arab.
Route, not route.
Not W, it is W.
It's can't, it's not can't.
Harass, which he always insisted be pronounced Harris, which I don't agree with, but I did it.
A time or two, I would play a record and say it was by Chet Atkins, and Arch would call up, madder than a wet hen, saying, I was making it sound like a bunch of hillbillies.
I can remember his calling me into the office early on and asking me to try to pay attention to my ing endings. He said, the way he put it was so Arch-like. He said, "I know you came from Georgia, but there's a G in Georgia, so you need to get these G's now that you're here in Virginia." So, that was classic Arch.
Oh, I corrected him once. Absolutely. He came in and tried to get me on the pronunciation of a town in Virginia. And I informed him that, even though I respected him greatly and I knew he was a great broadcaster, that I was a Spanish minor. I can speak Spanish, and I know that Bunavista is Buena Vista. And he said, "Phil, it is everywhere else but in Virginia. Here it's Buena Vista."
I think at the time I was calling it orange, like the fruit. But he was very patient. It's A-H-R-A-N-G-E. Orange.
Orange, not orange.
Orange and not orange. I was thinking about that not long ago. It is A-H-R-I-N-J, orange, not A-W-N-J, orange.
Getting the pronunciation tuned to Harrison's liking was only part of the challenge. Some listeners couldn't even hear the words broadcast from his station.
The only people that really complained a lot were the people that had trouble picking up our signal, because remember, we were AM only for a long time. And over at Lake of the Woods, in the far eastern part of the county, they couldn't pick us up in the morning. And they couldn't find out whether there was school or not.
Harrison wanted those well-formed words broadcast loud and clear into what became billed as the five-county area. To increase WJMA's reach and attract listeners from farther afield, Harrison applied for an FM license from the FCC in 1971.
Arch decided to go FM, and he hired an engineer out of Charlottesville, Mike Coffey, because he knew I couldn't do it.
WJMA FM went on the air a couple of months after I started. When I arrived in August of '71, it was being worked on. Equipment was being bought and installed.
So I remember knocking out the cinder block and putting the door casing and shoving the transmitter up in there.
Now simulcast on AM and FM, WJMA's programming continued with sports, music, the Swap Shop, and news from the Associated Press. But there'd been an increase in the size of the staff, and the mountain of accumulated paper and vinyl records begged for room.
In around 1974, we were beginning to burst at the seams. We were just running out of space. So Arch decided to add on to the back of the building and more than double the space.
Always on the lookout for ways to serve the community of Orange and surrounding counties, with the station's increased physical size and new office space, Arch Harrison saw opportunity.